We perceive the act of eating as a ritual of sustenance, a fundamental necessity that tethers us to life. We trust in the safety of our food supply, believing that our modern systems of pasteurization and preservation have conquered the primordial threat of decay. But biology is a patient executioner. Beneath the thin veneer of culinary civilization lies a dark anaerobic reality that our stomachs were never designed to navigate. Imagine a world where the sun has failed the fields, the crops are black, the livestock is extinct, and the only remaining organic matter is trapped within millions of bloated, pressurized steel cans. This is not a scenario of survival. It is a clinical report on the biological liquidation of the human species. Imagine that the only calories left on this planet are found in the fermented herring of the Arctic Surströmming. To some, it was a cultural delicacy. To the world that remains, it is a picnic-grade biohazard. Today, we examine the physiological horror of the olfactory abyss and the terrifying reality of a world forced to consume its own rot. Welcome to Discovered. To understand the magnitude of this catastrophe, we must first look at the cold, calculating chemistry of fermentation. Surströmming is not rotten in the traditional sense. It is a product of anaerobic digestion by salt-resistant bacteria. Specifically Haloanaerobium, these microorganisms thrive in a loxygen Hybrian environment, producing a cocktail of butyric acid, hydrogen sulfide, and ammonia. In a healthy world, these gases are a warning, a biological stop sign to the human senses. Hydrogen sulfide, the smell of tectonic failure and volcanic vents, is lethal in high concentrations. Butyric acid mimics the scent of rancid butter and human vomit. Ammonia is a corrosive irritant. Together they form an aroma profile so aggressive that it has been banned by international airlines, not for the discomfort of passengers but because the internal pressure of the cans can reach levels high enough to cause a mid-air explosion. We are not discussing a food product. We are discussing a pressurized delivery system for organic toxins. If this substance were to become the sole food source for humanity, the first stage of our erasure would be sensory. The human olfactory system is directly linked to the amygdala of the brain's center for fear and survival. To be surrounded by the scent of surströmming is to live in a state of permanent high cortisol alarm, but the psychological trauma is merely a prelude to the physical liquidation. The human digestive tract is a marvel of resilience, but it has a breaking point. Surströmming is saturated with sodium. A diet consisting exclusively of fermented herring would inject lethal quantities of salt into the bloodstream. Within days, the global population would enter a state of chronic hypernatremia. The excess sodium would draw water out of the cells and into the blood vessels, causing the brain to shrink within the skull. This leads to a cascade of neurological failures, seizures, intracranial hemorrhaging, and a state of permanent, agonizing confusion. But the salt is not the primary killer. The true horror lies in the bacteria. While Haloanaerobium is generally considered non-pathogenic in small doses, the human microbiome is a delicate ecosystem. If forced to process nothing but fermented high-acid protein, the gut's natural flora would be decimated. We would see the rise of the zombie gut, a state where the intestinal lining is chemically burned by the ammonia and butyric acid. The resulting mass intoxication would be characterized by uncontrollable violent emesis. Imagine 8 billion people, their bodies rejecting the only fuel available to them. This is not the vomiting of a standard flu. This is a biological purge that leads to esophageal tearing and massive internal bleeding. As the population becomes severely dehydrated, the electrolyte imbalance triggers global cardiac arrest. The streets would not be filled with the sounds of a civilization fighting to survive. They would be filled with the sound of a species retching its way into the grave. We must also confront the silent reaper of the canning process, Clostridium botulism. In a world where food production has collapsed and the Surströmming standard has taken over, the quality control of the fermentation process would vanish. Without precise salinity levels, these cans would become breeding grounds for the most lethal neurotoxin known to science. Botulism does not kill with fire or fever. It kills with silence. It paralyzes the muscles, starting with the face and moving down to the lungs. A botulinum-infected population would be a world of the living statues. Millions of people would remain conscious and aware as their diaphragms stopped moving, unable to take their next breath, staring at the empty cans of fish that delivered their execution. This is the objective danger of a biological breach, when the food that is supposed to save you becomes the instrument of your paralysis. The economic and social collapse would follow the biological one with a terrifying mathematical precision. Imagine a world where the only currency is the SRS, the Surströmming standard. We would see the rise of the stench cartels, where the right to eat is controlled by those who possess the last unexploded cans. But in this economy, the wealth is toxic. Every transaction releases a cloud of sulfuric gas that erodes the lungs of the survivors. Cities would become miasma zones, where the air is so saturated with the byproduct of fermentation that the oxygen levels drop below the threshold of human consciousness. We would see the great yellowing of the atmosphere, as the hydrogen sulfide interacts with the moisture in the air to create a persistent, acidic fog. This fog would corrode our infrastructure, dissolve the paint on our abandoned cars, and turn our homes into sulfuric tombs. History provides us with grim reminders of what happens when the human diet is compromised. In the 19th century, the Great Famine in Ireland showed how a single failure in the food chain could dismantle a nation. But the Surströmming apocalypse is a global trophic collapse. We are trading the vibrant diversity of the Holocene for a grey, slimy uniformity. Scientists are currently studying Surströmming bacteria to develop biofuels, suggesting that one day our cars might run on fish stank. This is the ultimate human hubris. The belief that we can harness the power of decay without becoming part of the decay ourselves. If our technology fails and we are forced into the microbe reboot, we will realize that we are not the masters of the bacteria. We are their protein source. The psychological gallows of this future is the loss of the clean breath. Human beings are sensory creatures, and we rely on the freshness of our environment to maintain our sanity. In a world of permanent fermentation, the mind would fracture. We would see a global surge in sensory-induced psychosis, where the brain, unable to filter the unrelenting assault of the ammonia and sulfur, begins to hallucinate a world of lavender and pine only, to wake up to the reality of the bloated can. The Daily Mail food writer who described his experience as the worst fart of my life mixed with unwashed body parts was only touching the surface of the horror. In a total exposure scenario, the human body itself would begin to smell of the fish, the skin would exude the sulfurous byproduct, the breath would be a conduit for the ammonia. We would become walking fermenters, our very presence a biohazard to others. The act of love, the act of family, and the act of community would vanish, replaced by a desperate, isolated struggle to eat without gagging. The discovery of the sheer chemical power of Surströmming is a reminder that the floor is thinner than you think. Our survival depends on a stable biosphere that produces fresh, non-fermented calories. When that biosphere is breached, we are reduced to scavengers in a planetary-scale dumpster. The zombie fish in a tin is not a joke. It is a clinical warning of what happens when humanity is forced to dine on the dead. The abyss is not a hole in the ground. It is the void inside a bulging steel can, waiting for the pressure to reach its limit. The end is not coming from the stars or the fire. It is coming from the liquidation of our own digestive integrity. We are a species that has mistaken delicacy for safety, and we are about to pay the bill in sodium shock and botulic paralysis. Sleep well, knowing that the lavender spa of your imagination is a fragile gift from a world that still grows grain. Cherish the smell of the rain and the taste of the fresh earth, for they are the only things preventing you from the olfactory abyss. The end is not a bang. It is a hiss of escaping gas from a rusted lid. The end is beneath you. If you are prepared to face the truths that the world chooses to ignore, stay with us. There are many more scientific anomalies and biological horrors waiting to be unburied. We will continue to explore the truths that have been hidden in the shadows of our own history and the depths of our biological limitations. Subscribe to Discovered and activate the notification bell. In a world of comfortable delusions and funny food challenges, we provide the cold clinical evidence of reality. Do not miss our next report, where we will examine the next impossible or almost possible scenario that threatens the very definition of humanity. See you in the next investigation. Remember, watch what you breathe, for the scent of the end is already in the air.